Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Fluently Forward. Harry Styles has his new album out, and this week, that's right, we're doing two episodes this week about Harry Styles. I thought it would be a great time to dive into him because we've never really discussed Harry Styles. I think over on Patreon, we did an episode all about like the Larry theory of like him and Louis, but I don't think we've ever looked into him particularly. And I was very interested as I did because I do have to kick off this episode being honest, and I have to admit, I never really caught the Harry Styles bug. Like, I know so many people are obsessed with him. I don't know why. Like, I really liked his first album. I know maybe like 20 of his songs, a pretty good amount. It just never really lined up like a puzzle piece for me. But in doing all of this research, I did come away feeling more tenderhearted towards Harry Styles, feeling like a warmth and a softness and kind of like a little bit of protectiveness for him. So, in the first episode for this week, we are going to talk about how he got his star, what he was like as a kid, how he got famous. Is he a trendsetter? How did, the media interprets him versus who I think he really is? His perspective on politics, him speaking about his sexuality, how he's a little bit of a lover boy. And then on Monday, we're going to talk about all of his blind items, which is going to go over who he dated, his beef with Maddie Healy. It's a one-sided beef, but whatever, and kind of the life that the blind items say he lived, which is very different from what People magazine says. So we'll get into it. My original opinion on Harry was basically I just thought he didn't really deserve a lot of the kudos that he gets. And that's going to be a common theme in this episode. Like, how does Harry see himself? And then how do the headlines and the media see him and kind of create this role that he steps into? And does it really fit? For example, if you went to his Wikipedia page, the very start of the page says, Harry Edward Styles, born February 1st, 1994, is an English singer, songwriter, and actor. His showmanship, artistry, and flamboyant fashion have had a significant impact on popular culture. And I feel like this is just such a through line with Harry Styles. I'm always reading about how he's doing this like unbelievable ground shaking, culture shifting shit. And I'm like, I just don't know if that's actually happening. Like, he's definitely a good looking guy. He's a great pop boy. One Direction certainly had a huge impact. You cannot deny that. But I guess I've always viewed Harry Styles as someone who kind of slots into the role that's meant for him rather than being someone who breaks down barriers and forges this new path that nobody's ever heard of before. And I don't really mean that in a bad way. I kind of view him as Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, where everybody wanted Jon to be king in the North, and he was like, I don't want it. I don't want it. That was a horrible impression. But now that I think about it, both Jon Snow and Harry Styles, there's a few similarities there. They both have the curly good looks. Ever since they were a kid, everybody's referring to them as such a pretty boy. Everybody wants them to lead, but like they really don't want to be leading. And then who would be Daenerys? I feel like that would be Taylor Swift. And they dated for a bit. Or did they? That's for the blind item episode. So anyway, now that his new album is out, and I'm recording this before I've even listened to it, but I'm sure it's good. I really do like his music. Let's dive into a little bit about Harry Styles. And we're going to start with how he got his start. So Harry Styles was born to the son of a pub owner, Anne Twist, and a finance worker, Desmond or Des Styles. When he was a child, he moved with his parents and his older sister Gemma to the village of Holmes Chapel in Cheshire. And his older sister, Gemma, apparently she was the studious one. He said before, quote, she was always smarter than me, and I was always jealous of that. So they ended up moving to this area, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Holmes Chapel, and it only had a population of about 5,000 people. His parents wanted a place for their children to grow up that was warm and welcoming with a real sense of community. Harry's talked about the area that he grew up before at his X Factor audition, saying that the area is, quote, quite boring and that, quote, not much happens there. But he did say that it's very picturesque and it's in a delightful setting with views over unspoiled countryside and farmland. And a quick question for anyone who's listening, would you like that or would you hate that? I would love it right now. For like a month, oh my God, I'd like love to be somewhere where nobody is. But it's almost like if you have curly hair, like thin hair or thick hair, everybody always wants what they can't have. I feel like it's the same thing if you grew up in an urban versus suburban or remote type of place. Now, keep in mind, some of this information that I got in this first section was in fact from a Harry Styles book because people are so crazy about Harry Styles. And whenever I read books about celebrities, I'm not quite certain how accurate the facts are. For example, they said that Harry's first word was cat. And I was like, ooh. I was like, that's a little bit too on the nose. Was his first word really cat? Maybe it was. We're going to move on. Apparently, Harry was a very creative kid. He would even, this is really cute, draw pictures on bread with food coloring and then toast it, which I have to say that is very creative. When he was a kid, he had a laid back attitude and he enjoyed himself. A lot of young kids were drawn to him and he made friends quickly and easily. He said, quote, I used to be friends with girls as well as boys. I wasn't one of those boys who thought girls were smelly and didn't like them. I was kind of friends with everyone. Now, his parents divorced when he was 7 years old, and he's talked about the moment and how it was impactful for him, but he doesn't really remember a lot of it, which sometimes makes you think, oh my God, was it like so traumatic that you didn't really remember it, but it impacted you so deeply? Who knows? We have a quote from People magazine where Harry's father, Des, described that day telling Harry and his sister that they were going to be getting a divorce as, quote, the worst day of his life. They say that apparently when they broke the news to their children who sat in front of them in the lounge, Harry, who wasn't usually one to cry, broke down in tears. Harry also admitted that it was, quote, quite a weird time. He said, I remember crying about it when my parents told me they were splitting up, but after that, I was all right. I guess I didn't really get what was going on properly. I was just sad that my parents wouldn't be together anymore. So, to ease the pain of the divorce, the father, Des, remained in the family home for 2 years, sleeping in the spare room, saying that it was the best way forward before one day he finally left for good. Then Harry's mother ended up marrying her business partner, John Cox, spelled Cox, just in case you were wondering. And then they did end up getting divorced years later. Now, when he was a kid, his grandfather gifted him a karaoke machine, and that was when Harry started singing using this karaoke machine. Apparently, the first song he ever recorded was Elvis Presley's The Girl of My Best Friend. Then at the elementary or middle school that he was at when he was younger, he was the lead singer for a band called White Eskimo, and they won a local Battle of the Bands competition, which shout out a lot of people are saying we're losing white boys in the cul-de-sac getting together in a garage and making garage band music. And we really are. It's like SoundCloud just pushed that genre out completely. But Battle of the Bands, I really miss, I don't know, that whole era. One of the songs that they played in this Battle of the Bands competition was a song that Harry and the boys had written called Gone in a Week. And you can look up the lyrics of it online. It's really cute. It's I'm going to be gone away for vacation for a week, but I don't really need to pack luggage because all I need to pack is you. As long as you're with me, I've got everything. It's really cute. I don't know why I'm getting misty over it. It's just cute. I feel like young boys, maybe this is, oh no, I'm starting to talk about that type of stuff. But I just feel like when young boys are doing things that are very gentlemanly or chivalrous, or I don't need to pack my luggage because all I've got is you, or even the Beatles with their simple lyrics of just I want to hold your hand. I've always thought that's just so beautiful. Just clear, simple, pure, young love and desire. I love lyrics that kind of encapsulate all of that. Now, apparently for the Battle of the Bands competition, Harry had vocals that were slightly off key at times, but he had such charisma, bouncy and energy, and an infectious smile that it made the gig a huge success, and they ended up winning and getting 160 pounds in crisp bank notes. And this is something that I think kind of follows Harry as a little bit of a pattern. I wasn't really around watching the X Factor, but of course I've gone back and watched all of the One Direction boys and their auditions and stuff. And I remember even with Harry, I don't think he was ever the strongest singer in One Direction. Correct me if I'm wrong, any of the Directioners, but I'm pretty sure most people said that Zayn had the best voice out of everybody. But Harry just always had that heartthrob boy band crooner type of energy about him. So, speaking of X Factor, let's get into it. Following a suggestion from his mother on April 11th, 2010, Harry Styles auditioned as a solo contestant for the 7th series of the British televised singing competition, The X Factor, and he sang a rendition of Train's song, Hey Soul Sister. He sang this and Simon Cowell was like, the track is not right for you, love. Instead, he suggested that Harry sings a rendition of Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely, and he did. He advanced to boot camp, but he did not progress any further, and there were 4 others in his age group who were also eliminated, and we know how this goes. They were put together to form the boy band in July 2010, and instead to compete in the groups category while being mentored by Simon Cowell. So this is how One Direction came to be. Harry Styles, Niall Horan, Liam Payne, Louis Tomlinson, and Zayn Malik. And they practiced for 2 weeks, and then they were a group that was on the X Factor. Apparently, Harry Styles was the one who suggested the name One Direction to everybody, which I was like, oh my God, that's such a big deal. He named One Direction. But when you look at different quotes about it, apparently they were just like throwing names out in a brainstorming session. And Harry was like, I don't know, this one sounds good. And they were like, yeah, we like it. And then it just kind of stuck. And that's what it was, which I always find interesting. So they started to get more popular in the UK, and within the first 4 weeks of the live shows, they were Simon Cowell's last contestant in the competition. They ended up reaching the final of the X Factor, and they were the last contestant eliminated on the show. So then they ended up signing a recording contract with Simon Cowell's label, Sicko Records. Which, by the way, now that we were over on Patreon a couple days ago, we were talking all in depth about the Jim Carrey and is he a clone and what's going on with his face type of theory. Whatever happened to Simon Cowell? Like, have you seen the work that he got done? It's like crazy stuff. Like, he's the original Jim Carrey, if you want to talk about anybody getting cloned and stuff like that. So anyway, One Direction gets signed and they start doing immediately really well. They have a UK #1 debut single, What Makes You Beautiful, and their debut studio album, Up All Night, is released later that year. It has 3 songs that are co-written by Harry Styles, and it debuts at #1 in the United States. They just immediately were like so popular. Then Midnight Memories was the world's best-selling album of 2013. The tour that followed it, the Where We Are tour, was the highest grossing tour of 2014. And then they released 4, and that also went to #1. So they were the only group in the 58-year history of the Billboard 200 albums chart to have their first 4 albums debut at #1, which is really impressive. And I have to say, like, maybe I'm going to finger wag at myself a little bit, the same way that most traditional like media companies and institutions will poo-poo pop music and pop culture and celebrity gossip and tabloids. They're like, all of that shit is so stupid. I have to check myself here because I think I did that a little bit with One Direction. I think I just saw like I don't know, maybe I was like aging out of the demographic and I was like, oh, One Direction, rolling my eyes at it. But that is incredibly impressive. All 4 of your albums debut at #1. Like, that is a huge deal. And to speak to just how popular One Direction and especially Harry Styles was, I feel like he was like the #1 most popular person in One Direction. This was from a Rolling Stones piece about him. They said about Harry, quote, he became a canvas onto which millions of fans pitched their hopes and dreams. Hell, when he pulled over to the side of the 101 freeway in LA and discreetly threw up, the spot became a fan shrine. It's said that the puke was even sold on eBay like pieces of the Berlin Wall. Paul McCartney has interviewed him. Then there was the unauthorized fan fiction series featuring a punky, sexed up version of Harry Styles. 1 billion readers followed his virtual exploits. And I do remember the movie The Idea of You, which I think was based on a book. It was with Anne Hathaway and some hot guy whose name I'm not remembering. That was like a Harry Styles fanfic. And then I think that there was also like another Netflix series, and I think I watched part of it. It's like this guy and he's like he's like a bad boy, and I think he was like in the lake with a girl, and I think that was also a Harry Styles fanfic. Basically, like, One Direction was getting popular at the same time that fan fiction was really taking off, and those two worlds colliding. I mean, my God. Like, put your hand up if you've either read or wrote Harry Styles fan fiction. I haven't. So I don't know why my hand's up. I just wanted to see you do it. But I know that a lot of it existed. I was just reading the Taylor Swift Carly Kloss stuff. That's what I was reading on Wattpad. So anyway, let's move through the timeline stuff about it. I do want to say, in hearing more about how Harry was as like a kid and a tween and his personality, it added a little bit of color to the Larry of it all. And if you don't know, which would be crazy if you don't, there's been this huge internet rumor theory for a long time that Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson from One Direction were secretly, it varies, in love with each other, had crushes with each other, gave, I don't know, hand jobs to each other, were dating, still are dating. Like, the Larry spectrum really goes far. But a lot of people think that there was something going on with Harry and Louis, aka the Larry of it all. And it's interesting because when you read all of these things about Harry when he was younger, it seems like he's always had a very boyish jokester energy from him. There are some stories from when he was younger. His friend said, quote, he was always up for fun, wacky things, having a laugh, and he never cared what people thought. Apparently, Harry and his friends like to dare one another to do crazy things at different parties at each other's houses. And Harry told We Love Pop magazine that, quote, at my friend's birthday party a few years ago, I got dared to go and get in bed with his mum. She was asleep and she woke up when I got in, so I just ran down the stairs. She had a robe on, but I don't know if there was anything on underneath. What? What? At first, I wasn't sure if this was true, so I looked it up online, and there's other sources that also are referring to the same story. So I guess that happened. Apparently, he also once ran through a train station with just his boxers on. So it seems like ever since he was a kid, both with Harry and Louis from the compilations that I've seen of them joking with each other or like holding hands or pretending to kiss each other and stuff, there definitely was a boyish, cheeky, prank, flirty energy between them. And I feel like I've heard some people say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a British thing? Because I remember when Taylor Swift was dating Joe Alwyn, all of these photos came out of Joe Alwyn like partying with his mates down at like the pub and the club, and they're kissing each other, like they're putting lipstick on each other, like they're have each other in headlocks, like their shirts are off, like all of this stuff. And I remember a lot of people were like, that's just mates being mates, you know? But then again, you could look at, I mean, I'm sorry, look at like the fraternity culture here in the United States. Do you know what an elephant walk is? And you're going to tell me that's not like a little bit gay. That's also boys being boys, but like it's a little bit gay. So, what do I think happened with Harry and Louis? I have no idea. I could imagine something happened in some capacity. I'll dip my toe into the Larry pond from time to time. I don't cannonball in, I'll dip. But I think it's also interesting to note that it seems like ever since he was a kid, Harry's been into doing like rambunctious, cheeky, boyish things. And maybe that could add some color to some of the Larry compilations. Now, one of the things I wanted to look into is the idea of Harry Styles being a trendsetter, because I feel like the media headlines and the Vogue covers, they really position him as this trailblazer. And I personally see Harry Styles a little bit more as someone who focuses on an homage of someone rather than trendsetting himself. And I find it interesting that he's so quickly given the title of this trailblazer when so many female musicians are not. They only get the copycat allegations, and Harry Styles gets like only 10% of the copycat allegations. For example, people say Addison Rae and Tate McRae are just copying Britney Spears. They say that Olivia Rodrigo is copying Taylor Swift, but then also Avril Lavigne, and then also ripping stuff off from Paramore. And then they say that Sabrina Carpenter is copying Taylor Swift, but then also Ariana Grande. And then they say that Taylor Swift is reversing that, and now she's freaking copying Sabrina Carpenter with her new song Wood, or the Opalite vintage music video, that Taylor Swift is now copying Lana Del Rey, that hold on, let me get it all, that Ariana Grande was copying Mariah Carey, Ethel Cain and Lana Del Rey copying each other. You know, like all of these copycat allegations happen. And I find it just so interesting that I do not think Harry Styles personally has this trailblazing, I stand on my own as such an icon, I'm not emulating anyone else narrative. But all of these media pieces build him up like he's doing something different than what the pop girls are. And I don't think that he is. So, for example, there's a Rolling Stones profile on him, and it's called Harry Styles' New Direction. And inside of that article on him, this is a section where he's talking about going out on his solo path and making his own solo album. And it says, quote, a plan came into focus, a song cycle about women and relationships, 10 songs, more of a rock sound, a bold single color cover to match the working title, Pink. He quotes the Clash's Paul, who says, quote, pink is the only true rock and roll color. And it's interesting that even in this Rolling Stone profile, they're like, he is being so bold by choosing the color pink. Okay, but then Harry follows it up by being like, well, actually, it was the Clash that said pink is the only true rock and roll color. And Rolling Stone is like, shh, no, 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 Harry. It's all you. It's your bold vision. And who knows, maybe part of this is a wordplay thing. And because he left One Direction, there were all of these pieces saying that he's going out on his new direction because they wanted to do the puns and the wordplay of it, which, first of all, must have pissed Zayn off, because he's like, if anyone's going out in their own direction, it was me and I did it first. But instead, all of these news articles are like, Harry makes his own direction. And is he or is he just walking in other legends' footsteps that came before him? So, another piece from an article on him is where he's talking about one of his icons and his inspirations, which is Prince. And this is what he says, quote, as one of the most well-known 23-year-olds in the world, Styles himself is still largely unknown. Behind the effervescent stage persona, there is more lore than fact. He likes it that way. Quote, with an artist like Prince, he says, all you wanted to do was know more. And that mystery, it's why those people are so magical. Like, fuck, I don't know what Prince eats for breakfast. That mystery, it's just what I like. And it's interesting that in this piece, they're like, Harry Styles is just like Prince. There's more lore than fact about him. We don't even know anything about Harry. He just like naturally keeps it a secret. And then Harry is saying in this piece, well, I really look up to Prince. I don't even know what Prince ate for breakfast. And that mystery is what I like. And I want to do something similar to that. And once again, Rolling Stone is like, oh my God, he's doing it on his own. It's like the first time anyone's ever thought this. And once again, like I would be remiss to say if one of the pop girls had a quote like this, I think that it would be represented differently in the media. I think she would be described as someone who's being calculatingly private or controlling their privacy or doing it in a conspiratorial way to try to get people to be more interested in them. I mean, look at Taylor Swift or even when like Beyonce stopped doing interviews or Rihanna not doing music anymore. It's all described in a much more calculating and controlled way when Harry's isn't, even though Harry is directly saying in this piece, well, I'm kind of doing it because Prince did it and I found it very magical. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. So another thing that I do want to get across here is that I don't think Harry Styles is the villain. I think that the media is just putting a shine on him that shouldn't particularly be there, because when I actually look at Harry Styles quotes in a lot of these pieces, I really like what he has to say, and I think he's got a great outlook on things. This is from another article. It says, this much is clear about Harry Styles. The classic role of tortured artist is not one he'll be playing. Quote, people romanticize places they can't get to themselves, he says. That's why it's fascinating when people go dark. When Van Gogh cuts off his ear, you romanticize those people, sometimes out of proportion, and it's the same with music. You want a piece of that darkness, to feel their pain, but also to step back into your own safer life. I can't say I had that. I had a really nice upbringing. I feel very lucky. I had a great family and always felt loved. There's nothing worse than an inauthentic, tortured person. Quote, they took my allowance away, so I did heroin. It's like, that's not how it works. I don't even remember what the question was. That's a quote from Harry. First of all, I love this quote and keep it in mind for when on Wednesday we do the episode all about Harry Styles and his blind items, because we will talk about Maddie Healy's one-sided beef with Harry Styles. And I think there's a few things in Harry's quote here that I don't think he meant it as a dig towards Maddie Healy, but I would love to interpret it that way because I do think Maddie Healy is kind of an inauthentic, tortured person. Oh, sorry, I just do. But Harry's quote here, I really, really like that. One of the things I've talked about before is how I think it's so funny that so many celebrities, like every single talk show, they're always talking about how they were such like an ugly loser nerd in high school with no friends. And you look at all of these people who have had perfect bone structure since they came out of the womb, and you're like, surely, just by measure and manner of statistics, not 100% of all of you famous people were ugly loser nerds who got bullied in high school. I know some of you must have been, just percentage wise. Some of you had to be popular and happy with how you looked. And I think for a lot of us, when it comes to what we want to see from celebrities, we just want them to be authentic. If you're unhappy, be authentic about that. But if you're happy, also be authentic about that as well. And I think a lot of celebrities think that they almost need to dim their happiness in order to be palatable to the public. So then that way they're not like bragging or showing off. And it's like, I actually dislike it more when celebrities are complaining, because then it's like, you know, maybe you're trying to be relatable or act like you don't have it all together, but it just makes the rest of us feel like even more crap, you know? Oh my God, you're a millionaire with 3 houses and even you aren't happy? Then there's no hope for me. So I think Harry saying like, I'm never going to pull the tortured artist thing because like I did grow up well and I do feel really lucky and I'm not tortured. I feel very loved and very blessed. I like that a lot. And I would love to see it in more celebrities because I think it's just human nature that we always like water tries to find its own level. So when a celebrity is complaining about something, it makes it easy for you to look at your own life and complain. But when Harry Styles is talking about how he had such a great upbringing and a childhood and he feels so lucky, it just naturally calls within you the urge to be like, Yeah, there were a lot of things I liked about my childhood, and I'm also lucky in all of these areas. I'm just like Harry Styles. I also agree with that. So I really like his realism and also his optimism. I find it very refreshing. So now I want to talk about his perspective on politics, which I find pretty interesting. This was in another Rolling Stone articles of his, and he was talking about his song Sign of the Times. It was, I think, his first single that he put out on his own, and it was also on his first album. This is what he said about it. Quote, most of the stuff that hurts me about what's going on at the moment is not politics, it's fundamentals, Styles says. Equal rights for everyone, all races, sexes, everything. Sign of the Times came from, quote, this isn't the first time we've been in a hard time, and it's not going to be the last time. The song is written from a point of view as if a mother was giving birth to a child and there's a complication. The mother is told, the child is fine, but you're not going to make it. And the mother has 5 minutes to tell the child, go forth and conquer. Now, first of all, egg on my face. I thought it was about love or something. Ooh, I did. When I listened to that song, I did not think that it was about like a mother and she's like, you're not, you have 5 minutes to talk to your child because you're not going to make it. That's very deep. That was a lot deeper than I took it. I listened to it and I went, is it about Taylor Swift? So now I need to re-listen to it because that probably is a lot more of what it was about. So let's talk about this quote of his where he's saying, what hurts me about what's going on in the moment is not politics, but it's fundamentals, equal rights for everyone, for all races, sexes, everything, blah, blah, blah. It's very nice, very Aquarian of Harry. I do think he is an Aquarius, right? And of course, this is an old quote. This isn't, from the past week that he said it. But I find it interesting because I think celebrities do this a lot. I think so many times celebrities don't want to talk about politics, but then they bring up something else that is basically politics. And you see this once again on all sides of the spectrum when Sydney Sweeney is like, I don't want to talk about politics, or like, I don't care about like what my art does. I just want to spread the message of love. And it's like, you don't think love and politics talk hand in hand back and forth to each other? It's just something that I find people who want to skirt the question say, right? That, like they're like, I don't want to talk about politics. I love love for everyone and I love freedom for everyone. And it's just like, yeah, that's why we want to get laws passed because we also care about that stuff. Like laws get passed to give people freedom. Laws get passed to have people love each other. Same-sex marriage, that was something that had to be political. So when Harry says this stuff where he's like, I'm not into politics, I'm into fundamentals and I'm into equal rights, it's like, bitch, like, sorry, you are into politics. And like, I don't think Harry is doing anything malicious. Like, I think that his heart is in the right place. But I think when he has quotes like this about politics, that's what really frustrates me because either him or all of the media pieces around him want Harry Styles to be just as notorious as Prince or David Bowie or Freddie Mercury or all of these icons in our past that were vocal and bold and proud. And all the way from Madonna to Princess Diana, there have been different figures and celebrities in our history that have pushed the barriers of what it means to really take a stand for humanity. And I think Harry Styles respects those icons. I think he reveres them. I think he wants to emulate them, but I think he focuses more on emulating their flare pants and their glitter crop tops rather than what they actually did, what they stood for, their actions, how they went against the grain, how they did something bold with their heart and their soul and they made an actual movement. And I know this might sound like a little bit nitpicky, and I am being nitpicky because I'm holding him to a high standard. Like he is a rich, powerful, straight, we don't know, white man with a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence. And I think he wants to be revered to a high standard. So great, I'm going to hold you to that high standard. And I'm not holding him to this high standard because I want to see him fail. I'm holding him to it because I want to see him succeed. Like I can tell that Harry Styles wants to be one of the greats. So be great. And that means that you have to do something great. So come on, like the time is ripe. Some might say that the time has actually passed, things aren't great right now. Like look around. I just think a lot of this is a missed opportunity because the more quotes of his that I read, I really do think that he has a great perspective and a heart and a mind on things. And I want that to be shared and shown with people. So to that end, here are some of the quotes that I really, really liked of his when I was researching Harry Styles. There was one where he was asked about how young people like his music. And let's see, this was the snippet from it. Asked if he spends pressure-filled evenings worried about proving credibility to an older crowd, Styles grows animated. Quote, Who's to say that young girls who like pop music, short for popular, have worse musical taste than a 30-year-old hipster guy? That's not up to you to say. Music is something that's always changing. There's no goalposts. Young girls like the Beatles. Are you going to tell me that they're not serious? How can you say young girls don't get it? They're our future doctors, lawyers, mothers, presidents. They kind of keep the world going. Teenage girl fans, they don't lie. If they like you, they're there. They don't act too cool. They like you and they tell you, which is sick. And hell yeah, I love that. Let me tell you, you do not get a lot of male musicians saying and speaking with such enthusiasm about having teenage girl fans. So many of them shun it all the way from who is that comedian who like looks like he's gotten all of the work done? Matt Rife, I think. He had a teenage girl audience fan base and he like hated and resented it. And you wonder with certain people like Shawn Mendes or Benson Boone, sometimes like people are really not nice to teenage girl audiences that lift them up. And you look in everything, even the way that women control like the buying market, or look at what they did with Heated Rivalry. There's like no girls in that show. It's just gay men and hockey. And girls lifted it up to such, a level, which was so disappointing then with the male hockey team at the Olympics fiasco, because it just feels like, even in sports, now I'm like going on a rant, but Taylor Swift brought so many eyeballs to the Kansas City Chiefs. So many girls were tuning in. They did like their merch sales, I think, went like 200x because Taylor Swift was dating Travis Kelce. Just for then, Harrison Butker to deliver that stupid ass commencement speech where he's like, "Oh, all of you people are graduating, but I'm sure you'd rather be mothers and wives because that's more important." And it just feels like there's so many different times throughout history where women, especially teenage girls, are uplifting something that helps men. And then they're just like immediately slapped across the face for it. So I really like that Harry Styles is saying something like this. And he's not even just saying, "Oh, I'm going to take it in stride." He's saying, fantastic. Young girls have so much to offer. They really have their finger on the pulse. I think that's really nice. And he does seem to authentically think about women in a way that most men don't. So I was looking into that, what's the reason for it? Some people say it might be because he has a close relationship with his mother. He said, quote, "Since I've been 10, it's kind of felt like protect mom at all costs. My mom is very strong. She has the greatest heart. Her house is where I want to go when I want to spend some time." And he also pops up with this viewpoint in other interviews as well. This was from another piece on him. It said, "When Harry Styles emerged, the UK was at the height of its tabloid culture, when celebrities were being hounded, exposed. That gave way to social media, where everyone expected to see everything, where anyone could publish snapshots, footage, gossip." Quote, "I think we're all in a moment of reflection," Harry Styles said. "You look back, especially now, there's all the documentaries, like the Britney documentary, and you watch how people were abused in that way by that system, especially women. You recall articles from not even 5 years ago, and you're like, I can't even believe that that was written." Isn't that amazing? Even just speaking about the tabloid culture and how it's been tough on him, he's giving a shout out to how it's also tough, especially for women. And I know most people might be like, "Oh my God, like the bar is in hell." Like he's just saying that. But you know what? I notice these things. I notice when every single guy says something that recognizes and calls out the disparity. And I think it's nice. I really like it. Now, this is a little mini section that I want to do because when I was researching Harry, I found this quote that really intrigued me and I think added a little bit of light to Harry's perspective in life. So, a few years ago, or maybe this would have been like 10 years ago or something, there was a location of his London home and it got published and he was rattled by it. And his friend, James Corden, offered him a motto that was coined by the British Prime Minister back in the day: "Never complain, never explain." I know that quote because I have turned to it when I have been rattled by things online. My mom actually got me a mug with like the phrase on it. And apparently the British royal family, that's what they use, this whole motto of never complain, never explain. And it's very good for the political royals. And I mean, we've seen it play out when everybody thought that Kate Middleton was missing. Let me tell you, they did not explain. They didn't complain and they didn't explain. And everybody was like, what the hell is going, where is Kate Middleton? And for myself, I know that I've been drawn to that quote and mantra or almost instructions of never complain, never explain in times where I have felt very self-pitying. I latch onto it and I go, oh my God, this is the Bible. Never complain, never explain. That's all I'm going to do. It's political, it's corporate. It feels almost like HR guidelines. And I think especially when you're in a role or a job that feels like there's no HR or no boundaries, sometimes it feels really nice to hold on to something like that. And I think for politicians and the royal family, it's really good to use. God knows I wish our president would shut the fuck up on Twitter. Sometimes never explain is a good thing. But I do think when it comes to providing a service or being in the arts, I don't think that the phrase never complain, never explain really does well. And it's funny that James Corden gave this as advice to Harry Styles. And now everybody's like, fuck James Corden. We don't like him. He's evil, like blah, blah, blah. I just think because the phrase and the mantra and the actions that follow it is so HR and political and corporate, you really see in artists when they adopt that mantra afterwards. There's like a before the mantra and an after the mantra. You can see this with Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Rihanna, Harry Styles. Like Rihanna used to be on Twitter responding to people, and now she like doesn't even post on Instagram. She's not even doing music anymore. Beyonce used to be a part of like the Cribs, and you could see the house and her bedroom that she lived in. Now she doesn't do any interviews. Taylor Swift used to be like on Tumblr and inviting people into her home, and now sometimes you won't see her for like months at a time unless she wants you to buy another vinyl variant or like merch. And I think it's a fine mantra to have. Like you can do it however you want, but it definitely moves you from a musician or an artist into a corporate musician and a corporate artist, because it's a very corporate mindset to basically have. So I think with Harry Styles, a lot of people say now that like, oh my God, he's so private. Like I think he did Brittany Broski's Royal Court show or something. All of the comments for every Harry Styles interview is always like, this is the longest we've ever heard this man speak before. And that's all well and good up until a certain point. And then you start to get a bunch of flack and shit because you're being too corporate and you're not being too real. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit with Harry Styles. Like, for example, his ticket prices came out, which, by the way, like, you could buy the ticket without having even heard the album yet. And they were all like $700 to like $1,000. And I think people started to get really upset with that. And I think that's when the whole never complain, never explain frustration starts to build with a lot of people. You're also seeing this with Taylor Swift as well. Like when you are a politician, never complain, never explain is great. If you're a musician and you want people to relate to your art, I think you need a little bit of a different mantra. So I don't know. There was another interesting tidbit here, though, because he is very close with James Corden. He was also very close with Ben Winston, who was the Emmy-winning executive producer of The Late Late Show with James Corden. So they became friends, Ben and Harry, when One Direction was taking off and when they were on The X Factor. He was at the time then a filmmaker and a production partner with James Corden. He asked for a meeting and he hit it off with One Direction. So he became this kind of friendly mentor to Harry Styles. And there was a moment in Harry Styles' life that I had no idea about, but I'm sure the Harriettes, the Stylers, I don't know what the name is. I'm sure other people would know of this story. This was after One Direction had been formed, but obviously like way before Harry Styles had his solo career. Harry Styles had just moved out of his family home and he was looking to buy a different place. And he found this home that he liked that was near the Winston family. Apparently, the house needed 2 weeks of work. So he was like, hey, Ben, could I move in with you and your wife just for 2 weeks while the house is getting worked on? And apparently, the wife agreed. And he was like, yeah, you can move in with us, but only for 2 weeks. So he parked his mattress in their attic. And 2 weeks later, he still hadn't bought the house. Something wasn't going through. And he was like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to buy that house. I think I'm going to stay here until Christmas, if you don't mind. And then Christmas came and he was still there. And basically, for the next 20 months, Harry Styles, who was like one of the most desired people on the planet, slept secretly in this small mattress in his friend's attic with like his friend and his wife, who were like 10 years older, just living in the house below him. This is what the article says. It says, quote, the only other bit of house dressing was the acoustic guitar that he would rattle into the Winston's bedroom. While fans gathered at the empty house where he didn't live, Harry Styles lived incognito with a couple 12 years his senior. Ben Winston said, quote, those 20 months were when they went from being on a reality show, The X Factor, to being the biggest selling artist in the world. That period of time, he was living with us in the most mundane suburban situation. No one ever found out, really. Even when we went out for a meal, it's such a sweet family neighborhood, nobody dreamed it was actually him. But he made our house a home, and when he moved out, we were gutted. Isn't that the cutest thing ever? And by the way, keep that little anecdote in mind when we talk about the blind items and Cindy Crawford and Randy Gerber and Harry Styles. There's a, cute little throuple. Just keep that in mind. I just thought that was so crazy. I had never heard about that. And as I was learning more about Harry Styles, I found a lot of similarities between him and Olivia Rodrigo. It's almost like I think Harry Styles has a lot of great qualities, like personality characteristics about him that give him a level head and it makes him a very sweet person. And I think those are the same qualities that hold him back from being this icon legend in the way of Prince or David Bowie. Like, I almost feel like for him and Olivia Rodrigo, they both have their hearts in the right spot. They're kind people and they're polite people. And that doesn't make you an icon because most people who are icons, oh my God, they're heinous. Like they're these raging narcissists. You know, we talked last week about JFK, the handsome president, rapist. Even one of Harry's icons, Prince, we've talked about him on Patreon. Oh my God, what a fucking menace. Like, if you want to be somebody where the entire world knows you by one name or one acronym or you're a billionaire, you're going to be a bad person to get there. Like, there's just no way that you can't be. So it's interesting because I feel like it's almost Harry Styles and his reputation and his image and what it means to be the Harry Styles. It almost teeters on this line where like half of it is saying, go and be this legendary icon. But then the other half is saying, well, you're a nice guy. You're polite. You're humble. You don't like people to know what you're up to. And it's like those two dichotomies are just like battling each other. So I guess it's almost the way I would say it is that to be an icon and to be a trailblazer, you have to be someone who says, fuck the system. And I think both with Olivia Rodrigo and Harry Styles, they're both just like a little bit too polite to say, fuck the system. They would probably be like, excuse me, system, like, do you mind if you move? Or they might be so humble that they don't believe that they actually have the power to really do anything. It's almost like that weird conundrum where the person who's best to be president is somebody who does not want the presidency. Once again, I'm thinking of Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. And then the person who ends up as the president is the person who was just like foaming at the mouth to have all the power in the world. Okay, anyway, another profile piece from him that I think adds a little bit to this point and says it more succinctly than I'm doing, I'm starting to ramble at this point, is this quote. It says about Harry, at points, he is almost daftly nice, too attentive, as if held in the throes of a decade-long bout of imposter syndrome. He confirmed that he does sometimes expect that someone will tap him on the shoulder and say, the jig is up, you're done now. That said, both Styles and his therapist have questioned why he cares quite so much about being likable. This is one of the things he thought about a lot in his big pandemic reflection. In part, it's a choice, he explained. He recalled moving to London after the X Factor and hearing tales of petulant celebrities screaming because somebody got their coffee order wrong and deciding to never be that guy, to never give someone a petty reason to badmouth him. But more recently, he's come to worry that the drive for approval came from a more complex place, a place of caution, fear, control. Quote, in lockdown, I started processing a lot of stuff that happened when I was in the band, he said. He thought about the way that he was encouraged to give so much of himself away, quote, to get people to engage with you, to like you. He thought about the fact that no baby photos exist of him that aren't on the internet, parentheses, you give a bunch to an X Factor producer doing a piece on your backstory without much thought, and suddenly your childhood is online. He thought about the journalists asking questions when he was still a teenager about how many people he'd slept with and how, rather than telling them to go away, he would worry about how he could be coy without them leaving the room annoyed. Quote, why do I feel like I'm the one who has done something wrong, he said to me after we got up to shift spots in the park when a teenager started filming us for a prank video. I could almost cry with all of this, but also what I hear in a lot of what he's saying is this is, I think, a very womanly thing to do. Like, I remember that movie that Margot Robbie was in and another woman was in, and she played Megyn Kelly and all of these people, Bombshell Blonde or whatever. It was about the women at Fox News who were getting sexually harassed by this toad whose name I'm forgetting, but like he ran Fox News, and how one of the blonde Republicans was saying to another one of the blonde Republicans, I'm forgetting all of their names, if a guy sexually harasses you, you need to find a way to be coy and just play it off. You know, you can't stand up and say, what the fuck did you do? Never put your hands on me. Instead, you have to go, oh, you would, or like, oh, ha, ha, just kind of fawn your way out of things and weasel your way out of things. So it's interesting to hear a guy talk about something like this because obviously I hear it and I relate a lot to it. You know, put your hand up. I'll actually put my hand up for this one. Put your hand up if someone like crashes into you in the grocery store and you're the one to, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Was I in your way? And you definitely weren't, but you apologize anyway. Like, it's interesting to see that Harry Styles has this. So we continue. This is with a different piece about Harry. It says, Styles said that he often spent interviews terrified about saying the wrong thing until he stopped to question what abhorrent belief or bizarre opinion he was scared he would accidentally reveal and realized that he couldn't think of anything. He thought about how, when good things happened, like a number one album, he wouldn't feel happy, just relieved. And he thought about the cleanliness clauses in the contracts that he used to sign, which would dictate that they would be null and void if he did anything supposedly unsavory, and about how terrified that used to make him. And about how when he signed his solo contract and learned that the ability to make music would not be affected by personal transgressions, he burst into tears, a reaction he still seems shocked by, retelling it to me now, years later. I felt free, he explained. First of all, I just want to say over here in my desk, I have something called isotyl powder. And it helps if you have OCD-like symptoms. You put a little bit of it into your bottle of water and you drink it throughout the day. And a lot of people are misinformed about what OCD is, okay? Because there's many different parts of OCD. And one of the parts of OCD that you can have is like morality OCD and being worried all the time about like, what if I'm a bad person? What if I'm going to get canceled? What if I said this wrong? What if I hurt somebody? Like, oh no, I'm always doing the bad thing. I'm like a bad person. That was a tangent. I would never diagnose anyone, but I would just say, it's a supplement. So anyway, I feel like this adds even more color to who Harry is. And once again, I see even more similarities with him and Olivia Rodrigo, because they were both made famous in a machine at a very young age where you have cleanliness clauses, whether you're representing the company Disney or a boy band, and you need to uphold the image of whatever you're doing. And I think all of that really does affect and have a lasting impact on you when you grow up. It's like, I don't want to do anything crass or impolite. The way that you're raised has such an impact on you. I know this for myself. Like, I was raised like, don't talk back. I have a really hard time standing up for myself. Even if somebody like leaves like a nasty comment, my immediate instinct is to be like, I probably deserved that. I probably did something wrong. The instinct to stand up for myself is so like down on the list. And it's interesting how this happens with a lot of people. And Sheryl Sandberg, who I don't think is a great person, but her book, Lean In, has some interesting tidbits. And one of the things that she talks about in her book, Lean In, which is particularly for women who are working in tech or in the corporate world, they were saying that women have a hard time advocating for ourselves, but it's so easy for women to advocate for others. That's why you get like mama bear syndrome, or if your mom comes with you for your doctor's appointment, to be your health advocate, because so many times you need that. And I almost wonder if that's why Olivia Rodrigo is so outspoken politically in a way that Harry Styles perhaps isn't. I know that this all sounds like a mess, but like, stay with me here. I think that there's a point. Olivia Rodrigo, she's the best. I love her. She's 23. She's so young and she's always speaking up. She's always on the right side of history. She's unafraid to speak her mind and do what's right. She has that fund, like the Good For You Fund with Planned Parenthood. She has them at her concerts. She's always giving out information and speaking out on what is right. And she did this a lot when Roe v. Wade was overturned. I remember she performed Fuck You with Lily Allen at like some festival the very next day, and she shouted out all of the names of the Supreme Court justices. And she was like 21 when she did that. And I feel like for people like Harry or Olivia or me, if you're raised to not talk back and to just be good and to just take it and like not stand up for yourself, it's hard for you to stand up for yourself, but you can stand up for others. And for Olivia Rodrigo, if that girl ever wants an abortion, she could get one in an hour, okay? Like, she's wealthy, she's privileged, she's able to do whatever. When she's speaking out for abortion and for women and what's going on with Roe v. Wade, she's doing that for others. She's not doing it for herself. And I'm sure when things happen to Olivia Rodrigo, I'm just speculating, it's hard for her to stand up for herself, but it's easy for her to stand up for others. And you see this in like the Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo situation. What happened with Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo was not right. And I'm sure her first instinct was not to stand up for herself. She barely even has now. Like, she put up the grudge, but she basically just took getting pummeled by the world's biggest pop star. But when it comes to others and what she can do to help them, she wants to stand up for them and she wants to speak out politically because it's for others and it's not for herself. And I'll just say it, I'm sorry, it's the complete opposite of what Taylor Swift does when it comes to politics. So now this leads me into Harry Styles. And I think that the way he could cement himself as this icon and legend and be really notorious in the way that he wants to be is by finding the other people to stand up for. Because I think he probably does have trouble standing up for himself, which anyone would in his shoes. I mean, like, it's just so traumatic to be famous at such a young age. He had such a rough go of it. He became so popular so fast. But I think that if he wanted to get politically engaged, and I know that he wants to, because even though he says he's not interested in politics, he then names a bunch of things that are political that he's interested in. I think that he just needs to focus on caring for others because I think he has a really big heart. And I think that would be the direction to kind of posit him in if I was like a puppet master and I could like try to control Harry Styles. More on his big heart, by the way. I found it really cute in all of these articles just how much of like a lover boy he is. This was from some piece on him, and he was saying, quote, "My first proper girlfriend used to have one of those laughs. There was also a little bit of mystery with her because she didn't go to our school. I just worshiped the ground she walked on, and she knew, probably to a fault, a little. That was a tough one. I was 15. She used to live an hour and a half away on the train, and I worked in a bakery for 3 years. I'd finish on Saturdays at 4:30, and it was a 4:42 train, and if I missed it, there wasn't another one for an hour or two. So I would finish and sprint to the train station. I spent 70% of my wages on train tickets. Later, I'd remember her perfume, little things. I'd smell that perfume all the time. I'd be in a lift or a reception and I'd say to someone, alien, right? And sometimes they're impressed and sometimes they're a little creeped out. Stop smelling me. The smell thing is real. Smell and memory, by the way, a fun fact about it is that something about smell when like it goes into your nose, it bypasses some area of your brain and it basically goes directly to the memory center. And that's why memories and smells are so connected. I did not explain that the right way, but I'm not a scientist, okay? Here's another piece about how Harry Styles is a little bit of a lover boy. This is from an article where they were talking about how he was making his next album. And it says, quote, "House workers would sometimes leave at night and return the next morning to see Styles blearily removing himself from a long stream of rom-coms. He declared himself an expert on Nicholas Sparks, whom he now calls Nicky Spee." It's just cute. Like, and you know, any guy who's into romantic things, I think is like really cute. And then there's another cute quote from him where it says, "I always said at the very beginning, all I wanted was to be the granddad with the best stories and the best shelf of artifacts and bits and trinkets." He's an old soul. He's an old romantic soul. It's cute. I'm starting to get it, girls. I'm starting to get it. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is his sexuality, which a lot of people want to talk about when it comes to Harry Styles. I just find this interesting, and I think I find parallels to him saying that he's not interested in politics, but then naming a bunch of things that are kind of political. So this is from a piece. It says, "Around the time of Fine Line, he faced scrutiny around his sexuality. People became incredulous that he wore dresses, waved pride flags, and yet hadn't clarified with precision publicly to a journalist or on social media the specifics of who he'd slept with, how he defined. This expectation is, to him, bizarre, outdated. Quote, I've been really open with it with my friends, but that's my personal experience. It's mine," he said. "The whole point of where we should be heading, which is toward accepting everybody and being more open, is that it doesn't matter, and it's about not having to label everything, not having to clarify what boxes you're checking." And that was one of, I think he's only given like that quote and one more about his sexuality, and then the rest is just kind of like, you know, he wore a dress on the cover of Vogue. He has a nail polish line in some music videos. There's like men and women getting all sweaty with each other. Men and women, men and men, women and women. You know, it's just bodies on bodies. So this is a quote about it, and I find it interesting and almost kind of oxymoronic in a way. You know, he's like, the whole point of where we should be heading is that everybody is being more open. And he's like, and to that end, don't ask me. I just find it, I get what he's saying, but I think sometimes I have a little bit of frustration with a mentality that I see with some people where they talk about the world that we should be living in rather than the reality that we currently do live in. And I know that it all comes from good places, but I see this rhetoric online a lot when people talk about how we shouldn't be telling girls to watch their drinks or to go out with the buddy system. We should be telling men not to rape. And it's like, of course. Of course, we should live in a world where no one should rape anyone ever. But that is not the world we live in, and we would be doing a disservice if we didn't tell girls about how to avoid these heinous situations that could happen. And I think we need to, like, of course, we need to look to the future and what should be happening, but we also do need to pay attention to reality. And I think when Harry says something like this, right? Like the whole point of where we should be heading is towards everyone being more accepting and open and not having to label things. Yeah, that is where we should be heading. But what changes culture? What changes the time? The sign of the times. It's not just time that changes things, it's work. It's brave people doing brave things. It's annoying people who don't shut the fuck up about an issue. It's people who are stubborn and proud and strong and headstrong and insistent, like that is the energy that it takes for things to move and change. You need a force in order to change something. I think that's one of the laws of physics. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you need force for something to change. And I think Harry saying, like, well, we should be heading to a place where I don't even have to do this. We should, but how do we get there? And how do we get there quicker? And I think one of the ways that we get places and the culture changes for the better is when famous people take a stand and they do something to change things. And we have some examples of icons who have done this. So 1987, at the height of AIDS hysteria, we had Princess Diana, and she publicly shook hands with an AIDS patient without gloves. And a lot of people at the time thought that HIV could spread through touch. And she did this, and it was a radical, soft, beautiful act, and it meant a lot. It changed a lot of things. Elton John, he came out late 80s, early 90s, tons of homophobia. He came out, he founded the Elton John's AIDS Foundation. Even Ellen DeGeneres, I know everybody like fucking hates Ellen DeGeneres now. She came out both personally and through her sitcom character. And that was a huge deal for lesbians everywhere. Ellen did it. You know what I mean? So when I think about how the times have changed and they're still a changing and how things have gotten better throughout history and we've been more open and accepting, there's always names to me that spring to mind of figure stones that were able to help this and push us forward. And they did something brave and they took a stand and it made a huge impact. And of course, it's not Harry Styles' job to do that, but it could be a privilege of his to do something. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't owe it to anyone, but he has the opportunity, the privilege, and the potential to do so much. And he doesn't have to, but if he wanted to, he could. And it's right there, like if you want to be an icon and you want to be a legend and have your name with all of these people that you emulate, it's right. The time is so ripe. And I think he's almost kind of unsure of what to do as well, because when I look at a lot of the quotes that he says around this, so like even, what is this quote? He says, it doesn't matter. And it's about not having to label everything, not having to clarify what boxes you're checking. I almost hear people say things like this sometimes. And I remember actually it was an ex of mine and I was about to get my nose done. I was about to get a nose job and I had previously dated her, but we were friends and we were talking and she did not like the fact that I was about to get my nose done. And I remember we were at this like Mexican place having drinks and she was like, what does it matter? Like, it's just a nose. Like, you shouldn't get it done. Like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't change anything about who you are. Like, it's just a nose. And I remember being like, mirror, hello, right back at you. Like, it's just my nose that I'm getting changed. So why are you freaking out? Like I'm about to disappear as a person or become someone completely different. I'm with you. It's just a nose. So what does it matter if I do get it done? So I find it interesting when Harry or even Shawn Mendes, I see like a lot of celebrities do this. They're like, it's just a label. What the fuck does it matter? And it's like, well, you could go either side of that argument, right? What does it matter? I don't have to tell you. Or what does it matter? Here, I'll tell you because it doesn't matter. So it's interesting. And of course, like you can't not look at the way that there's such a public weight to every single thing that a celebrity says. Like I'm pretty sure Billie Eilish has said, it was in like a recent article of Cosmo or something like that. And she was like, I wish I never came out as gay. Like I wish I could take it back. And I don't know, I find all of that interesting. Like, of course, we never know what celebrities are going through when they say something and the impact of their words. And being private versus public about something doesn't always mean that you're ashamed versus proud of something. But I do think just intrinsically as humans, if we are proud about something, we love talking about it. We find ways to bring it up. If I'm proud about something, I'm going to work it into every conversation that I can. And if I'm ashamed of something, or if I feel feelings of shame about something, I will twist and turn and backbend to avoid that topic no matter what. So I'm not saying, by the way, that like any celebrity who doesn't talk about their sexuality, they're ashamed of it. But I think there's elements of shame that could come from a variety of directions that at least when the interviewer asks them, they're not like, oh my God, thank you so much. I'm glad you brought it up. I'd love to talk about it. And we do see celebrities who have that. I mean, even like Youngblood, I think recently came out and he was like, yeah, I'm pansexual. Like I've done it with everything and I would do it again. And I'm excited to do it tomorrow. Or even with the Olympics, Amber Glenn, love her. She's out as pansexual and she's so proud. And when she talks about it, what can I say? Like, it just makes my heart soar. Like, I feel very connected to anyone who's talking about their sexuality. I feel understood. I feel happy. I feel encouraged. And that doesn't mean that like every single person has to talk about their sexuality, but the way that Harry Styles talks about it, it almost reminds me of his quote where he was saying, right, like, this is it. Most of the stuff that hurts me about what's going on at the moment is not politics, it's fundamentals, equal rights. And it's like, so you agree, you do think you're really pretty. It's like, so you agree, like you do care about politics. And then I think Harry saying it doesn't matter, but then not talking about what his sexuality is means that it does matter. Because as much as we wish that we lived in the future where none of this stuff mattered, it's 2026. And unfortunately, like sexuality is still a big deal. I'm not faulting anyone who wants to take their time with it, but I find it interesting in the language that he communicates with this because in another piece that I was reading about Harry Styles, so many pieces on Harry Styles, he was talking about how he had a lot of avoidant tendencies. Hashtag Aquarius, of course you do. But he was saying how over COVID, when a lot of things shut down, he had to work on being less avoidant. And he had to have a lot of conversations with his family and friends about difficult communications that he had just always avoided in the past because when he was young and he got famous, it was just so easy to go on to the next thing. If something is hard or difficult or uncomfortable, I can just immediately pivot and go on to the next greater thing and like leave that hard conversation in the dust. And he was basically saying COVID made me slow down and I did a lot of those hard conversations. And I would just wonder maybe the final boss of like hard conversations that he's been kind of avoidant about would be, and I'm not saying he has to do it to the public, but just with himself, how do I feel about my sexuality? Am I proud of it? Do I hate it? Do I love it? So who knows what will happen? But let's end the episode here. And then on Wednesday, we're going to talk all about the blind items and everything that's going on. I'm so excited to talk about his beef with Maddie Healy. Like, I'm already excited for that. So this is my takeaway on Harry after doing a bunch of research on him. He's one of the most famous people that nobody actually knows. And is it on purpose or is it not? Like, is it born out of a desire to keep things close to the vest, or is it born out of a trauma of how insane everybody went when he was so famous? Harry Styles, I find very interesting. Like, he lived in an attic for 20 months and nobody knew. He says sexuality doesn't matter, but then he also like doesn't want to talk about it. But then he also wants to wear like a dress on the cover of Vogue and make merch with nail polish. But then he's also like, don't talk about it. But he's talking about it. He's doing everything but talking about it, basically. He says he's not into politics, but he cares about equal rights. So he kind of is. He talks about mystery and Prince and all of these icons and people that came before him. Is he following in their footsteps or is he trailblazing? The media would say one thing, I would say a different. He's terrified of saying the wrong thing. He burst into tears when he found out that his solo contract didn't have a cleanliness clause, and his therapist is literally asking him, why do you need to be so likable? It's very interesting stuff. So I think that Harry Styles is a person who has been so conditioned to be palatable and basically be this canvas for everybody else's projections on him. And we genuinely don't know who he is. And I don't know if he knows either. And by the way, I don't mean this as like an insult. I just think he's much more of a mirror ball, hashtag Taylor Swift, than he is a trailblazer, hashtag Freddie Mercury. And it is interesting, actually, now thinking about it, I do see a lot of similarities between him and Taylor Swift. It's like on the spectrum of being famous and what you say about gay rights and politics. It's like Taylor Swift is here. For anyone listening to audio, let's say Taylor Swift is at the top, then Harry Styles is below her, then Olivia Rodrigo is below that. I think like all three of them care about being good, being well-liked, being palatable to people, being nice and well-mannered and respected by people, and being the good girl or the good boy. They all got famous at a young age. They're all icons in their own right. But I think Olivia Rodrigo, who shockingly is the youngest, is the one who's breaking the most out of that mold and doing the most trailblazery things. But I don't think it's over for Harry Styles. I think there's a lot of potential for what could come for him in the future. So let me know what you think about him. I know that I'm like such a novice when it comes to Harry Styles because, like I said, I never really got the bug. But I will say, after looking up more things about him, I think he's like a real sweetie. And I really want to protect someone like Harry Styles because he just seems like a real sweet guy. And even having gone through the blind items, which I still need to record that, but I already did the research for it, there's like no nasty blind items about him. And that is so hard to find with a good looking male musician. Like at this point, anyone who's like not a pedophile. It seems like that we thought the bar was in hell, and now the bar is like, are you a famous man and you're not a pedophile? Okay, good job. It's just like makes me sick. Anyway, so I really think that Harry Styles has a good head on his shoulders, a good heart in his body, and I wish the best for him. And I'm very excited to do the blind item episode. So I'll see you guys in a couple days for that, and I'll see everybody else on Patreon for another episode on Friday. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.